Good afternoon, everyone, and happy New Year to you all. I certainly hope everyone had a great holiday season. I hope you all behaved yourself and didn't do anything that I wouldn't do. That doesn't leave you with too much, so I think you're all okay. So Happy New Year. Welcome to our first webinar of 2025. I got to remember to say that. I know I'm going to make mistakes and say 24. But welcome. And my name is Alina Gilbert. I will be presenting today. And we are going to run through a few housekeeping items before we move forward with 2024 year in review. What have we learned? I always want to say, if anything. All right. I feel so bad for this little T-Rex. He's just so adorable and cute and can't make his bed. It's very sad. Anyhow, for those of you who have not joined us for webinars before, on your screen, the bulk of your screen should be this little T-Rex trying to make the bed. And kind of on the left side of the screen, there is a little window with the presenter, me, hello. And on the right side, you're going to see an icon that says chat. So that is the icon you're going to click on if you have questions as we go through the presentation. I do save questions for the very end because I want to make sure we have enough time to get through all the materials before we get to the questions. But hopefully today we will have plenty of time. So type in your questions, and like I said, I'll get to it at the end. If you have any audio or video problems while we are amidst the webinar, there is a little button on the bottom that you can press that says no audio or video question mark. Go ahead and press on that, and it takes you through a few steps, and hopefully that does the trick for you. The class is going to give you 1 CMCA credit for attending. You have to stay on the whole time, and it'll be automatically emailed to you. It's usually within 24 hours, but if you don't see it by Monday, shoot us an email. And you can email education@altitude.law. Okay. As a reminder, this presentation will get recorded and it is going to go on our YouTube channel so that you can watch and rewatch this as much as you want, because I know that's exactly what all of you want to do. So please feel free, if you like this class, to recommend it to someone to watch. But it will be out there for all to see. And the last little bit is we have an automatic survey that's going to pop up as soon as I'm done presenting. Again, if you've done this before, you know what happens. It pops up automatically as soon as we shut down the webinar. If you have a couple minutes and you're willing to put, in the time and energy, sure would appreciate any feedback you might have with respect to the webinar. Sometimes people have great ideas or they have really good constructive criticism that helps us, either improve our current productions or helps us come up with new and different topics to present on. So if you've got something that you're thinking about, please just put it in there. We definitely appreciate any feedback that you can provide to us on this or any education topic, really. So now, without further ado, let us start. So this is becoming a tradition for us. I think this is the third or fourth year in review that we've done. It's the first January program, and we try to look back at the prior year and look at different things. We look at the negatives, the positives, things that we've learned, what worked, what didn't work, try to get some predictions in for the following year. So that's what we're going to do today. And we're always going to start off with, what did you think of 2024? And honestly, these are not all things that Alina sat down and came up with. I like to send questions to lots of different people and ask them specifically what they thought. There were a lot more comments than this, but a lot of them, or most of them, didn't really pertain to us and our industry. But in general, I compiled what I got back. And so this is some of the stuff that I got. More anti-HOA legislation. Specifically, people are not happy with House Bill 1233, and I can understand why. Legislation is unclear. We don't know how to comply. I think that also goes to HB 1233. Insurance premiums still out of control. Deteriorating civility. People feel empowered to be jerks. So this is all from 24. The CTA came about. Nobody liked that. Demand for immediate responses. People have less patience. People don't want to do their jobs. And general hostility towards HOAs, which you can see in the media, with social media, news articles, podcasts, etc. I think we can all agree that these negatives were definitely present with us in 2024. This is sad. The positives. Most people told me when I asked for positives, they were kind of like drawing a blank on this issue, drawing a blank, can't think of anything. That's really sad. And honestly, this is really what I got. It was like pulling teeth. The CTA is on hold for now. Thank goodness 2024 is over. That's positive, I guess. People talking or taking more personal time and traveling, and no catastrophic events for the most part. Of course, we did have that hurricane, but this is people mostly from Colorado who weren't present for that. So this is all we got. And that's, I think, very telling of the state of mind that people were in 2024. I really hope 25 is a better year for everyone. And next year when I'm doing this class, we have a lot more positives about 2025 than we do about 2024. So now that we know what people thought of 24, let's talk about what we may have learned in 2024. Well, the feds are afraid that HOAs are laundering money, hence the CTA. Well, not exactly. But as you all know and have probably heard, the CTA, the Corporate Transparency Act, federal act, was enacted for the purpose of catching these types of criminal activities like laundering money. And the feds basically thought that, hey, if we can get people to report, when it comes to any kind of a company, we get people to report the beneficial owners for that company, that somehow helps us to be able to spot this type of activity easier. And regardless of what you might think about the CTA, that was the goal. And associations got caught in that trap because we fall under the corporations that are created by filing documents with the Secretary of State's office. And therefore, we are corporations subject to the CTA. And there was a lot of confusion. What do we have to do to comply? What do we have to do? And then we started to see challenges. If you recall, the first case we saw on this was the Alabama case, where the court basically said that the CTA violates constitutional rights. And it said that the CTA was unenforceable. Of course, it didn't have a nationwide presence, and it really only applied to certain types of corporations within Alabama, but it was something. We then saw CAI National file a lawsuit against the FinCEN to try and get an order from the court saying that this does not apply to HOAs in any way, shape, or form. They had a whole bunch of different arguments, and that case is ongoing. But what happened was CAI asked for an injunction from the federal court, basically saying, until we figure this mess out, HOAs don't have to comply. And unfortunately, the judge did not give us that injunction, so we were still forced to comply. Well, then there was a case out of Texas where the federal judge said, hey, we are putting in a national ban on HOAs having to, well, actually the CTA being constitutional. HOAs don't have to comply. Nobody has to comply. And so that was kind of, people were excited. Oh my God, this is national. We don't have to file anything. Of course, that was very short-lived, because then we had the courts come in and reverse that and say, no, we are going to have a requirement until this matter is litigated and we come to a conclusion. But wait, not so fast, because then we had court come back again and say, no, we're going to reverse this. You don't have to comply right now. So that's kind of where we are right now. But that is also, it could be very short-lived, because we're expecting another court ruling here either tomorrow or next week sometime that tells us whether or not we have to comply again. It's a lot of back and forth, and it's extremely confusing, and it's just been a pain for associations. And, you know, kind of, how is an association going to launder money? Our records are open to all our members to see, right? Our financials, it's an open book. This is not the type of company that really is going to be impacted by this legislation. We don't launder money. HOAs can't really launder money. We shouldn't be impacted by it. And that's really been the crux of the arguments, other than, of course, all the other constitutional type arguments. And what I personally don't understand is why FinCEN is pushing back so hard with respect to creating an exemption or even an extension for filing for HOAs. There are so many exemptions in the statute already. Why won't they do one for HOAs? And in fact, it just feels like they're pushing back very hard, extremely hard, harder than they should be with respect to this issue. When CAI approached FinCEN to request some kind of an extension, or at least you know, put everything on hold until we can figure this out, the CTA put out an actual statement to the media, and we saw it, that this applies to HOAs. When CAI sued, FinCEN was on it, and they are just not willing to do anything to help the associations with this. So really, what's next? I think your guess is probably as good as mine. So we're just going to have to ride this roller coaster and see. Does it make sense to register in the meantime? I think for those of you who have registered, great. At least you don't have to worry about this back and forth. For those of you who have not registered, totally up to you. I mean, this could come back and then you're going to have to jump on it again. So you could wait and see, or you can just say, I don't want to deal with it. We're going to register, and hopefully this gets resolved over the next year and we don't have to worry about it next year. Totally up to you. All right. So what else have we learned? Insurance costs are not decreasing. We were hoping, right? We were wishing, and unfortunately, we are just not seeing that yet. Are we going to see it? Who knows? And specifically, when I talk about insurance costs, I am talking about both wind-hail deductibles, and I'm talking about premiums, and mostly for property policies, of course. And I'll tell you, everyone has kind of different ideas about this, but what most folks agree on is insurance carriers lose money in Colorado, mostly because we have a lot of wind-hail claims and we have a lot of fires. And it's a double whammy for us, especially in the mountains. And we cost a lot of money to the insurance carriers. And so there have been a lot of things put into place now for the insurance carriers to protect themselves. Some of them have left the market. Some of them have put caps on how much they are willing to insure a single community. For example, there are a couple of insurers that have put a $20 million cap in place and said that if your community is valued over $20 million, things that UHOA have to insure, we're not going to insure. So you're going to get a denial. There's one that I can think of that's $35 million, so a little bit higher. But associations, like big communities that have way more value than 20 or 35 million, they're struggling because they're either trying to get different insurers to insure different portions, and basically they'll get a $20 million policy from the main insurer, and then they go to the secondary lines and kind of supplement the rest through the secondary lines. And those are also pretty expensive. So it's a problem. Everyone knows it's a problem, and people are struggling. Associations are struggling. What are the factors that we are seeing really that impact the costs? Well, it definitely depends on the type of community we're talking about. If you've got a single family home community, the HOA is not going to be struggling with that. Usually homeowners, they insure their own homes, and it's kind of each homeowner to himself. When we talk about condominiums, especially ones where we got stacked units, there's a problem there because those are getting to be pretty expensive to insure. And if you're a huge condominium community and you're valued over 20 million or over 35 million, you are struggling. Townhomes, where the associations insure the structures, also struggling. So depending on the type of the community you are, you might have more problems than another type. Age of buildings is also huge because, the older the community, the harder it is to get the insurance, especially if you're a condominium community. The location is also key because right now what we're seeing is our mountain communities, they are paying almost $1 million a year for their policies. And we're seeing, kind of like the Denver metro area. I mean, they're all over the place, but $500,000 a year for the premium is nothing. That's pretty average these days. Usually it's higher. So clearly these prices are just outrageous. And the age of your community, where you're located, that is all going to play a big part. Another thing that insurers have been looking at is grills. And you've probably all heard this from your brokers, is if you're allowing grills on balconies, on patios, that could impact your ability to get insurance coverage. It's a fire hazard as far as insurance companies are concerned, and they just don't want to put themselves out there. So a lot of times you'll get a nice letter from them saying, hey, we notice you've got grills. Either you prohibit them entirely and tell homeowners to remove them, or we're not covering you next year. Same thing with aluminum wiring and polybutylene pipes. Now, aluminum wiring and polybutylene pipes we typically see on older buildings. They don't construct anymore with either of those components. So on top of having this aluminum wiring and polybutylene pipe issue, you're an older community, which means things are starting to fail. And that makes it that much harder to insure. So I have seen on several occasions, older communities get letters also from their insurers saying, you have aluminum wiring. Here's what needs to happen. You need to replace all the wiring with X. You take all these steps before the renewal period is up. And if you don't, you're not going to have insurance through us. And associations are struggling to come into compliance with all these new, well, they're not really new, but with all these requirements that the insurers are imposing on them and threatening to take away coverage if you don't do it. Because obviously, requiring all your homeowners to replace wiring, to replace pipes, that's easy, right? We can do it. Yeah, it's a fun project. And finally, ever since the Florida condo collapse, deferred maintenance is huge. They want to know, insurance Insurers want to know that there's not any deferred maintenance, that we're current with all the upkeep, that we're doing preventative maintenance, that we're not just waiting for something to happen before we fix it. And this, we see the deferred maintenance issue, we see everywhere. It's not just insurance. It's also bank loans, homeowners buying in communities. All the banks want to know, do you have deferred maintenance? Because if you do, you're not getting money from us. So big, big, big topic. All right. So this is another thing we have learned. Some legislation may be impossible to comply with. And in fact, there is a very specific one I'm going to focus on right now, and I know we're all struggling with it also, and that is delivery of notices of delinquencies to your homeowners. Before, it would be, we send it certified mail, we post it on your door. Okay, we struggled with that, but we figured it out. Well, now with 1233 in place, we no longer have to post it on the door, but we've got to pick two of these methods right there: email, phone call, text. And the biggest problem with this is associations don't always have an email address. We don't always have a phone number or a cell phone number to text. So what happens when or if we don't have this information? It is literally impossible to comply with a statutory requirement. So what do we do? Well, nobody really knows the answer to that question. There's kind of conservative views and there's less conservative views. The conservative view is you're probably not going to be able to collect, but it's a huge risk. We can try to explain it to a judge as to what happened, but no guarantees. I think that's appropriate because we can't guarantee anything, because if you haven't complied, you haven't complied. I know there's a more lax view also out there that's like, it doesn't matter. Courts will allow it. Not sure about that. But again, we don't have any guinea pig cases. So ultimately, at least in my opinion, the conservative route probably works best, as long as the associations are aware of the risk and they're okay moving forward. As really with any legal action, that's their choice, and they can do that, and we can do that for them. But it is confusing, and it is very difficult to predict how these things are going to work out. This is a repeat from last year, because this all came about with House Bill 1137. If you recall, with a huge, huge change in our enforcement process. Just as a reminder, before House Bill 1137, if you were in the industry then, you probably remember repetitive violations, no problem. We had a specific provision in our enforcement policy that says if you violate the same rule this many times within this time period, we're skipping all these letters and we're taking you to court. Remember that? That made our life a little easier, and that helped us enforce those types of repetitive violations. When 1137 came around, it took all that out, because you can't enforce repetitive violations. In other words, violations that, there's some examples there: odor, noise, parking, trash cans, yelling. Because once the odor stops, once the noise stops, that violation is cured and done. When it starts again, it's a new violation. Well, what does that mean for us? It means that you have to start your enforcement process from the beginning. Again, every time you have a new violation, the statute, Kiowa, says you've got to start and do all these steps before you could turn it over to legal counsel. So typically you are going to be in a circular pattern of sending courtesy letters to your owners over and over again. Each time they make noise, each time someone yells at someone else in the parking lot, yeah, we can send a courtesy letter, but as soon as they stopped yelling and they drove away, they just cured that violation. So the next time they do it, it's brand new. We can send them another courtesy letter, but never going to get to the fine process. And we are never going to get to the turning it over to our attorneys process. And the worst thing about this is that if you're the homeowner who's experiencing all this nuisance, if you're the one who's got the stomping upstairs neighbor, or the one who's getting screamed at in the parking lot, you don't understand the legality of this. All you know is we have an HOA and it's not doing bupkis to help me, and you get upset. And we're seeing this more and more and more. Homeowners are at their wits' end because their associations can't help them. Nothing they can do, right? But they're blaming the associations because they just don't understand that the law doesn't want, that isn't allowing our communities to really do anything to address this. And I've been to meetings many times in the last couple of years where the sole reason for me being there was to address the angry owners who didn't understand why the board wasn't taking action with their nuisance complaints. And I explained it to them, and they were still angry. They were still angry with the board. They were angry with me, but don't shoot the messenger, right? But I expect we're going to keep seeing this. And unfortunately, unless the statute changes, I don't see a whole lot of change coming on this particular enforcement issue. People are still mean. This is my favorite quote. It's by Mike, well, it's not my favorite quote, but it's one of my favorite quotes. And it's Mike Tyson of all people, but I think he's got it. He gets it right on the nose. Social media made y'all way too comfortable with disrespecting people and not getting punched in the face for it. It is so easy for people to hide behind social media. It's not just in an HOA context, obviously, but people are so brave to insult others, to call them names, to accuse them of things when they're not standing face to face with them. Isn't that the truth? And people are so brave to throw stuff out on the internet that spreads like wildfire and can give people bad reputation for no good reason. And people are also very quick to believe everything they read on these social media posts. It's a very, very dangerous situation as far as I'm concerned. And all it does is create a hostile environment for people. And it creates rumors that are very difficult to dispel because it spreads so quickly, and it spreads in all facets of what we do. And so, again, this is Alina's opinion. I believe that as social media, as the internet, as you know, as we continue to see more platforms out there, I just don't see people getting any better. I wish I had more faith, but I just don't. I think in general, people love to hide behind their computers. So that's just my opinion, but people are still mean. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that, and they're probably going to stay mean in 2025, but I hope to God I'm wrong. So fingers crossed. Virtual meetings. Oh, and by the way, no real cats were harmed in that meme, so please don't be upset. Virtual meetings. We love them or we hate them. The people who love them for a variety of reasons. They love them because they're safe. Speaking of mean people, a lot of people are scared to have physical meetings because they've got owners who are threatening to hurt them. They've got owners who are threatening to bring weapons to a meeting. And yes, I guess we could try to get an off-duty police officer to be there, but really, do we really want to go through all that hassle when we can have a perfectly safe meeting virtually? If you got a gun during a virtual meeting, the only thing you're shooting is your computer. And okay. It's easier to attend virtual meetings. You don't have to get up. You don't have to get dressed. You don't have to put shoes on. You don't have to get all your papers together and walk or drive somewhere. I can wear my pajamas and I can just log in and I can be at that meeting and no skin off my back. And when I'm done, I turn off the computer and I'm still on the couch or in my bed or wherever it is I'm doing the meeting from. So much easier to attend. And of course, for the folks who are running these meetings, typically the community managers, it's easier for you to regulate the discussion because you can mute people who are being loud, obnoxious, disrespectful, who are railroading the meeting. You can mute them. And guess what? You can also kick them out of the meetings and not let them back in. And that is a big advantage to, first of all, making meetings more productive and less abusive, but also with respect to making sure that the folks who are going to abuse the process don't abuse the process. Sorry, my throat is getting so dry. Okay, the folks who hate these meetings, I've noticed they tend to fall into kind of the older category of people, most of them, kind of like over 65, over 70, mostly because they didn't grow up with computers. Having these types of internet discussions, Zoom meetings, it's not second nature to them like it is for those folks that have just grown up with computers. They have a hard time figuring out how to log on, how to ask questions. You see them in these meetings, you log on and you'll have, someone in there and they don't know how to mute their microphone and they're having conversations with people, in their living room and things like that. So folks who aren't really tech savvy, they do not like these types of meetings. It's just too difficult for them. They're much more used to being in in-person meetings and just being able to just go and be there, and they want to have one-on-one communications. They believe that in-person meetings, you have better discussions. You can look someone into the whites of their eyes, which you can't really do on the computer. I mean, you can, but they won't know you're doing it. So the folks that really hate the virtual meetings, like I said, tend to be less tech savvy, more like used to being, face to face with people, and that's really what they want, and that's their comfort zone. I have a board that is really composed right now of folks that are pretty much over 65, and this board meets in person no matter what. They will not do virtual meetings at all. I mean, they won't even do it as an alternative during bad weather. They rather cancel their meeting than do a virtual meeting. So to each his own. I can tell you from my perspective, I would much rather attend a virtual meeting, as I suspect a lot of you. As a professional, as a community manager, as an attorney, it is much easier for me to log on from my office or from my home office and to be able to attend a meeting. I can give you the same advice either way. So for me, it is preferable to do virtual meetings, but I also, if somebody wants us to go to an in-person meeting, sure, we'll do it if that's what they want. But again, we've got a very split group of folks as far as loving and hating the virtual meetings. All right, we didn't learn that much. It was only 6 things, but I think they are patterns that we see year after year. And I'm really hoping next year, I hope 2025 teaches us something brand new, something we never expected to learn. Wouldn't that be cool? Something good, something really good. Like, I want to be taught that people are getting nice, but we'll see. So let's talk about things that worked for us in 2024. By us, I mean associations. shifting insurance obligations to owners. So this goes back to the really high increase in insurance premiums and the deductibles and things like that. So we have seen more and more communities amend their declarations to shift the insurance obligation for the residential structures to the homeowners. Of course, this requires homeowner approval if you're going to go that route. And there's always considerations here. There's always pros and cons, but primarily I see them I see this happening in townhome communities, because in townhomes, the homeowners actually own their structure and they're not stacked on top of each other usually. So it's a lot easier to say, homeowner, you insure your structure, and owners are more willing to do that. It's harder with condominium communities. And if you sit on the board of, or you manage a condominium community, it is very important to remember that if that community was created after July 1, 1992, that means they are subject to Kiowa, all of it, including the insurance obligations. And one thing that Kiowa requires for our condominium communities is that you, association, insure the actual condominium units. You can exclude, though, finished surfaces and homeowner installed upgrades. So what does that mean? It means in a condominium complex, the associations have to insure the drywall, the subflooring, the structural components of the buildings, the originally installed fixtures. They don't have to insure things like wallpaper, paint, carpet, hard surface flooring, the upgraded countertops homeowners had put in after construction of the buildings. Now, keep in mind, if your declaration requires your community to insure all these things, then you have to insure. But if we're relying solely on Kiowa, all I'm saying is that you need to be aware that you can't really shift the structural insurance obligations to your homeowners. But it can and does work in communities that are townhomes, in townhome style, as long as you can sell it to the membership. Conducting insurance reviews and audits. This is, if you get the newsletter or you read the newsletter that you get, we just did an article on this. They came out January 2nd. And basically, what's an insurance audit? It's a legal review of your policy, of the endorsements, of your governing documents with respect to what's required, what the law requires. And then it's a written report basically telling you, here's what you need to have, here's what you have, here's some things that you need to have that you don't have, here's some overlap in coverage, here's some problematic things. And what we're hoping to find, or what associations are hoping we find, and we sometimes do, is that some associations are over-insuring. They are insuring components they shouldn't be insuring, that the declaration doesn't require them to insure. They are insuring, they have additional endorsements that don't really apply to the association. That has been found. And sometimes if you find these things and you shed them from your insurance profile, your premiums will go down. And so, plus it's always good to know where you stand with respect to the association's insurance. So that's something we found in the last year has actually helped a few of our associations where they've had this done, this work done, and then they were like, oh, wow, we have all this stuff that we don't need to have. And so they were able to shed some of that. So again, this is something that your attorneys would handle for you. This is not your insurance professional. This is a legal review of the insurance. What else has worked? Updating collection policies. And that was, of course, it's a requirement under House Bill 1233 with the new delinquency notice delivery requirements. So if you haven't updated it, you're probably not going to be able to move forward with your collections until you do update it. Adopting a policy for registering email addresses and phone numbers of homeowners. So this goes back to, again, how do we comply with a statute that requires we deliver notices in 2 out of 3 ways that require us to have email addresses and or phone numbers? Well, homeowners aren't giving them to you. A lot of our communities have adopted these policies. And if Altitude prepared your collection policy, you would have gotten one of these because we did it at no charge as part of the package for our communities. If you had someone else prepared for you, I don't know what other firms are doing. I don't know if they're preparing these policies for you or not, but I would recommend it because it does a couple of things. One is if we end up trying to collect in court, right? And we're in front of a judge and we haven't been able to comply with a statute. We've only been able to send an email because we can't get their phone number. Having the policy in place shows the judge that we are doing absolutely everything we can to try and comply with the statute. We even adopted this policy, but owners aren't complying with it, and we can't get blood from a turnip. So, but it helps us look like we're doing everything we can. The other thing is the homeowners see it, and then for those homeowners who want to voluntarily comply, which is a lot of them, they will provide us with this information, hopefully. So I think that is something that we've seen work. We've seen associations get this information after they adopted the policy and sent it out to the homeowners. Retaining a third party to assist with CTA registrations. So assuming it's back on or it doesn't go away, or you decide you just want to get it over with and handle it, there are some management companies who are assisting with the registration. There are law firms. I know we are assisting with registration for CTA. And I'm sure there's other third-party companies that are neither management companies nor law firms that are also assisting. Obviously, it's all for a fee. But I've seen associations or boards, rather, have a lot of pressure lifted off their shoulders by using a third-party registration company, because then all they do is supply the information. They follow the step-by-step process that the company gives them, and they're done. And then they don't have to worry about it. So I think that is something that has worked for lots of associations. Using experts, that always works. And, I am a big proponent of using your experts, and it's not because I want your experts to have extra money. It is because we have a wonderful provision in the Nonprofit Act that protects boards from liability if they rely on an expert opinion. The opinion does not have to be right. As long as you rely on it, you do what the expert recommends. If it later turns out to be completely wrong, the board, doesn't mean you won't get sued, but what it means is you will not have a liability exposure for making that decision because you relied on an expert and that's all you knew. And that was your due diligence as a board. So for those folks that work with me, I know you probably are used to me saying, when you call me and you say, well, this person wants their window replaced, then I'm saying, have we had someone come look at it? Have you had your contractor come look at it? Because we need an opinion from our contractor to tell us what needs to happen, and then we need to do what the contractor recommends. Using experts is always a good idea. Even if you have someone on the board who happens to be an engineer and we need an engineering study, I would say go get a third-party, non-interested engineer to come and do it and give you their report with their recommendations. That is the sure way to protect yourselves from liability. And last but not least, what I also see working is extra communication with owners. A lot of boards right now are scared to disclose things to their homeowners because people are mean. See, it's all kind of comes together in a big ball. Everything's related to everything, and people are mean. which makes boards more scared to admit to mistakes, to disclose problems in the community, because they don't know what the homeowners are going to do, right? And people are mean, and they're going to say mean things, and they're going to yell at us, and they're going to put stuff out on social media about how bad we are. Well, guess what? They're going to do that regardless. But my experience has been that the more open boards are with their homeowners, whether it's good or bad, the more open they are, the better the homeowners treat them. The homeowners may not be happy with something happening in the community, but when the board reports it to them and gives them information, they don't feel like they're being blindsided, and they don't feel like there's something secret going on in the background, and now they have to be suspicious of the board because the board's brought everything to the homeowners. I'm not saying the homeowners decide how to handle it, but it's just giving them the information, and that is always a positive thing. So if you're not doing that right now, maybe have some kind of a session with your management company, with your legal firm, to talk about how maybe communication could be made better in your community. Let's look at what didn't work. Well, that little turkey, it's not going to work that he's going to go in that into that, whatever that is, bakery or whatever. It was funnier in my head when I looked at it. I know, it's getting late. All right, so what didn't work? Refusing to adopt updated collections policies. We already talked about this, right? If you haven't adopted them, you're not going to be able to collect. Failing to follow advice of professionals. Why does that not work? Well, again, you're exposing yourself to liability, especially if you have an opinion from an expert and you're choosing to do the opposite of what the expert is telling you. Bad. If you get sued and that comes into the mix and that gets disclosed at trial, that's going to be horrible for the association and for the board. So if you don't like the advice your professional is giving you and you think it's wrong, then get a second opinion. But don't just say we're not going to do it because we don't like it. That is the quickest way to land yourself in trouble. Not using an insurance broker who specializes in HOAs. I say this time and time and time again, every time I teach an insurance class, there's only a handful of HOA specialists in Colorado, okay? Handful. It's very different to specialize in like property insurance, business insurance. Those are all very different than specializing in HOA coverage. We have so many nuances when it comes to HOAs and Kiowa and what's required and what's not required and how things work, that if you don't use a professional, an HOA professional broker, then you are not likely to get what you need, and you're likely to have extra maybe coverage that you're paying for or not enough coverage. You might be lacking in certain endorsements that are needed for HOA coverage versus other types of coverage. And probably if you are using a non-HOA professional broker and you're not switching to one, you really better have your law firm perform the insurance audit, because you're really going to need one to make sure that everything is, your I's are dotted, your T's are crossed. What else didn't work? Trying to save money by doing it yourself. This is another big one. I'm only going to speak to it from the legal context, but I suspect it applies in other contexts as well. But I have associations that reach out to me and say, hey, Alina, we're rewriting our governing documents. We wanted to save some money on legal fees, so we did the initial drafts. Can you review them? They end up paying far more for me to review and rewrite what they did than what they would have paid if we just did it from the get-go. And I don't know how many times I can tell folks that. And we have so many intricacies in our laws, and we keep getting more and more legislation, as you know, that adds specifics to what we can and can't do, to what we have to put in documents and what we can't put in documents. There's always things coming up. It is impossible for someone who is not an HOA attorney specialist to draft a document that complies with all of this and that gets those nuances. It's just not possible. And it's easier for us HOA practitioners to draft something from scratch using our own kind of hand than it is to review something and try to figure out where it goes wrong and then rewrite those sections. It takes much more time to do that. So please, please, please don't do it yourself. Even if you have an attorney on the board, because I've seen this, oh, we got an attorney, they know what they're doing. No, they don't. Unless it's someone who is an HOA specialist from one of the main HOA firms in Colorado that you all know, I guarantee you they don't know. So don't do it. Waiting for the last minute, or to the last minute, waiting to the last minute to do something. And this applies in many contexts. It applies, for example, for those folks who waited to register for the CTA. There's an influx within the last 2 weeks of December before, you know, we had the court case. Influx, everybody wanted to wait till the last minute. I'll give you another example. When we have to update policies and the policy goes into, the required policies go into effect August 5th, which seems to be a pretty typical date to do it, August, and people don't, like, associations don't turn over the requests for the updates until a week before. And by that time, of course, there's like a month backlog to get everything done because nobody wants to submit it at the very beginning when the law is first announced. We usually have at least 3 months from when it is approved, from when the governor signs off on it, to when it has to be done. And I don't think we get too many requests for the updates the first month. And everything really comes in the 3rd month when we're all scrambling to comply. Don't wait till the last minute because you're not going to get it on time. So, like I said, it affects other things as well, not just legal and policies. All right, let's go over some predictions for, oh my goodness, these are predictions for 25. Look at that typo. See what I mean? I did it. I didn't put 25. I did the typo. Ugh. All right. Sorry. Just cross it out and put 25 in there on your little handout. What are we predicting for 25? We're predicting more document revisions, pushing insurance obligations. Oh, you know what I did wrong here, don't you? These were predictions for 2024. And I'm just looking to see if we were right with those predictions. I tell you, I don't know where my brain is. I think I left it back in 24. All right, more document revisions, pushing insurance obligations onto owners. We did see a lot of that in 24. So yes, that did happen. Finding reasonably priced insurance will be nearly impossible. Yes, that happened too. Assessments will increase. We've seen that as well. We're going to see increased collections as owners come to the end of their 18-month payment plans. I didn't see that. We did not see a huge uptick in collections as people came to the end of the 18-month payment plans. So that's interesting. So that didn't really happen. Next, we had predictions there was going to be more legislation making life difficult for associations. We predicted a fully funded reserve account would come about, and thank goodness we were wrong on that. We predicted a cleanup bill for 1137. Well, we had 1233, which they deemed a cleanup bill, but it really wasn't because it made more problems for us. So I don't really consider it a cleanup bill. There was threats of a full Kiowa rewrite, that didn't happen. And also manager licensing, that did come up during the legislative season, but it didn't go anywhere. So that didn't happen either. So we kind of got 50% maybe of that. Now we got predictions for 2025. Yay, I got it right. I didn't make a mistake. Ah, thank goodness. All right. So more document revisions, pushing insurance obligations to owners. It's the same as last year. We are predicting more of that because insurance prices are still increasing. HOAs, now this is interesting, two polar opposite predictions. One of them will be right. HOAs exempted from the CTA, or HOAs are forced to comply with the CTA. Again, I asked folks for what they think, and so I had to put it in there. Increase in the number, or increase in turnover of board members and managers because people are sick of being treated badly. This goes back to the mean people, right? Yeah. So a prediction of people are going to start leaving. They don't want to deal with this anymore. They're sick of it. There's better places they can be and better things they can do where they don't have to deal with this. An increase in virtual meeting. I think that's like an even bigger increase in virtual meetings. So that's another prediction. Finally, we got more legislation, and the things we are anticipating, or at least guessing we're going to see, again, something with reserve funding and having to be at a certain percentage or being fully funded, which would be very scary because it's not really possible. Additional collection requirements, additional foreclosure requirements. So there's probably going to be a lot more than that, but that is what we are predicting for 2025. Oh, a wonderful, wonderful quote by Dave Barry. I'm going to do some questions. How about that? Oops, how did that happen? Okay. Meanwhile, let's see. Okay, what does the CTA stand for? I apologize. It's the Corporate Transparency Act. Okay. For nuisance and noise, can the HOA require the owner to install sound mitigation if they have over a minimum number of people? Oh, there's a lot of things you're opening up here. We have a top floor condo with 16 people, and the noise below the floor stairs is horrible. Other units have 8 people, and I want to require them to install sound mitigation over 10 people. You cannot regulate occupancy of a unit. That is the quickest way to get yourself sued and get yourself involved in a fair housing accusation. In other words, discrimination. How are you going to define 10 people? What if it's a family of 10 people? Are you going to tell people that they can't have a family of 10? That's discriminatory. That's familial discrimination. Are you going to say that people have to be related? Well, how do you define related? Again, you're defining what a family is. Familial discrimination. No way. Don't go there. You shouldn't base anything on the number of occupants you have in a unit. If there are restrictions at the county level or the city level, report the violations to the city or county, let them come in, let them handle it. They are not subject to fair housing laws like associations are. As far as requiring someone to put in flooring, I mean, you're going to be stuck with, you're never going to get to the court part of it. So you can require it, but they've already cured the violation as soon as the noise stops. So they all go to bed, no one's stomping. Okay, they've just cured it. So I think you're going to have a really, really hard time doing that. Next one. How do you insure the buildings in case a townhome owner refuses to insure their townhome? If you shift the obligations to the owners, do you have to carry some sort of supplemental coverage? And that, you just hit the nail on the head, which is, remember I said there's pros and cons to shifting insurance. This is the con, is that you can't guarantee that all owners are going to have adequate insurance, unfortunately. And if someone is underinsured, that does come back to bite their neighbors. There is no supplemental insurance out there to be able to cover for that. And if the association is like, well, we'll just cover the building and hopefully the homeowner's insurance covers that, that's not going to help, because if we cover it, where our insurance is primary, and you're not going to save on any money. All right. I am sorry. I know we've got a few more questions, but it's 1 o'clock. I respect everyone's time. And here's my email. You're welcome to email me. I'll try to answer you as quickly as I can. It'll probably be into next week, but I'll try to get back to you. So just shoot me an email if you want. Otherwise, thank you so much. Please fill out the survey that you get. And I really appreciate you guys coming in, and Happy New Year. We'll see you next week.